Everyone ignored her for being a cleaner's daughter, until she taught the billionaire's wheelchair-bound son 7 languages. The evening light danced through the empty halls of the Blackwood mansion. On the 3rd floor, a boy with sad eyes watched the world through a huge window. Lucas was only 5 years old, but his gaze carried a weight no child should ever know. With an already automatic movement, he turned his wheelchair when he heard approaching footsteps. Martha, the nurse, entered the room carrying a tray with medicine. "Time for your medicine, Lucas," she announced in a neutral voice. The boy held out his hand without saying a word. He knew the routine: 3 different pills, a glass of water, then the exercises for his legs that no longer responded, always the same, day after day. "Your father called," Martha commented as she arranged the pillows on the bed. "He said he might get here in time to say goodnight." For a moment, Lucas's face lit up, but the glow vanished as quickly as it appeared. He already knew what might meant when it came from Thomas Blackwood. The mansion where Lucas lived was impressive: 22 rooms, an Olympic-sized pool, a private movie theater, and gardens that seemed to stretch on forever. From its perch on the hill, it commanded a view of the entire city below. Any child would dream of living in a place like this. Any child, except Lucas. "Can I go to the garden today?" he asked in a low voice, while Martha helped him with the exercises for his motionless legs. "It's getting chilly out there," she replied, checking her watch. "Tomorrow, maybe. Now it's time for your bath." Lucas didn't insist. He had learned early on that insisting rarely changed things in the world of adults, especially in the universe of rules and commitments that revolved around his father. Thomas Blackwood was no ordinary man. The owner of one of the world's largest tech companies, his face constantly appeared in magazines and on the news. The business genius, the visionary of the digital age, impressive titles for someone who, to Lucas, was just a distant figure who came home late at night and left before dawn. Dinner was the same as always, Lucas alone at the huge kitchen table, while the staff moved around him, efficient and distant. No one really talked to him beyond what was necessary. It was as if an invisible barrier separated him from the rest of the world. Back in his room, Lucas looked without interest at the wall filled with expensive toys, robots, remote-controlled cars, video game consoles, gifts that arrived regularly, always sent by his father's assistants. Soulless objects, bought out of obligation. "Time for bed," Martha announced, helping him into bed. "Your father sent a message. The meeting is taking longer than expected. He said goodnight." Lucas nodded silently, swallowing his disappointment. Martha adjusted the blanket, checked the monitor beside the bed and turned off the main lights, leaving only a soft lamp on. "Sleep well," she said, closing the door. In the dimness of the quiet room, Lucas pulled his teddy bear close, the only gift he still had from his mother. It was old and worn, but he slept with it every night, hugging it as if he could reclaim a bit of the warmth he had lost 2 years ago, in the same accident that took his legs and his mother. A car pulled up outside, its headlights briefly illuminating the ceiling of the room. Lucas lifted his head, hopeful. Footsteps in the hallway, low voices. The boy held his breath, but the footsteps continued on, toward the other wing of the mansion. Silent tears streamed down his small face as he squeezed the bear tightly. It wasn't his father. It never was. The morning arrived grey, with rain tapping against the windows. Martha entered at 7 o'clock sharp, bringing breakfast on a special tray. "Good morning. Today you have your lesson with Mr. Peters at 9 and physical therapy at noon." Lucas picked at his toast without an appetite. His life was a predictable sequence: private lessons in the morning, therapy in the afternoon, doctors, nurses, and the silence of the giant room. "Your father left this for you," Martha added, placing a box wrapped in shiny paper next to the tray. "He had to catch a flight to Tokyo. He'll be back next week." The boy opened the package unenthusiastically, revealing the latest model of tablet on the market, something that hadn't even been officially released yet. With it was a card in his father's secretary's elegant handwriting. "For my boy. With love, Dad." Lucas knew his father had never written that card. Thomas Blackwood probably hadn't even chosen the gift. It was just another task delegated to someone on his team. Buy something expensive for my son. During his lesson, Lucas answered the questions mechanically. He was smart, all his teachers commented on it, but he rarely showed interest. He learned because it was what was expected of him, not out of genuine curiosity. "You're distracted today," observed Mr. Peters. "Sorry," Lucas mumbled, turning his gaze back to the book. "Is something bothering you?" The boy hesitated. Adults ask questions out of politeness, not real interest. "No. I'm fine." Physical therapy was the part of the day Lucas hated the most, not for the exercises themselves, but for the constant reminder of what he had lost. Every assisted movement was a confirmation of his limitation, of the difference that separated him from other children. "You're stronger today," praised Dr. Chen, the physical therapist. Lucas just looked out the window at the falling rain. What good were strong arms if he couldn't run or stand on his own? In the afternoon, when the rain subsided, Martha took him to the garden. Sitting under the elegant gazebo, Lucas watched the drops run down the leaves of exotic plants, imported from countries he would never visit. A squirrel darted through the bushes, climbing trees and leaping between branches with ease. Lucas watched, fascinated by the small animal's freedom, something he would never know again. "It's getting damp out here. Time to go back," Martha announced after a few minutes. Back in his room, Lucas picked a book from the shelf. Unlike the toys, books were his real treasures. Through them, he could visit distant places and live adventures, even if only in his imagination. When night came and the lights were turned off, Lucas looked at the only photo he had with his mother, on the nightstand. In it, he was standing, smiling, holding her hand. He was 3 years old at the time, and the world seemed full of possibilities. "I miss you," he whispered to the picture. The monitor beside the bed blinked with a message. It was his father, on a quick video call from some hotel in Tokyo. "Hello, champ," said Thomas, his tired face illuminated by the artificial light. "How was your day?" "Normal," replied Lucas, trying to hide the joy of seeing his father, even through a screen. "Did you like the tablet?" "Yes. Thank you." "Great. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. We'll talk more when I get back, okay? Be good for Martha." The screen went black before Lucas could say anything else. Less than 5 minutes. That was all the time Thomas Blackwood, the busy billionaire, could spare for his son. Lucas hugged the teddy bear against his chest. Outside, the Blackwood mansion shone in the darkness, imposing and luxurious, visible from anywhere in the city, a symbol of wealth and power. Inside it, in the most beautiful room a child could have, surrounded by everything money could buy, little Lucas fell asleep alone, his heart filled with an emptiness that no fortune in the world could fill. The alarm clock rang at 5 in the morning in the small suburban apartment. Ruby opened her bright eyes, staring at the peeling ceiling. Through the thin wall, she heard her mother get up and start getting ready. "Ruby, honey, it's time," called Sophia, knocking gently on the door. "I have to get to the Blackwoods' house early today." The girl got up quickly. At 6 years old, Ruby already had a routine that many adults would find tiring. Waking up before the sun, dressing herself, packing her small backpack, and going with her mother to work. Since her school vacation started, she had nowhere else to stay while Sophia worked as a cleaner in private homes. "I'm ready, Mom," she announced, coming out of her room with her blonde hair in a messy braid she had done herself. Sophia smiled, fixing her daughter's braid. "Remember the rules at the big house, okay?" Ruby nodded. She knew the rules by heart. Don't touch anything, don't make noise, don't leave her mother's sight, don't bother anyone. Basically, be invisible. The bus was crowded that morning. Ruby clutched her worn-out backpack to her chest, where she kept her treasures, a storybook, a notebook with colored pencils, and the small teddy bear her grandfather had given her before he got sick. While Sophia argued with the driver about the bus fare, Ruby watched the city through the window. The sun was beginning to rise, first illuminating the downtown skyscrapers, then the luxurious houses in the wealthy neighborhoods, and finally, the gray suburb where she lived. "Mrs. Blackwood will show us the work today," Sophia commented, as they walked from the bus stop to the entrance of the gated community. "Please, we have to make a good impression." Ruby just nodded, holding her mother's hand tightly. She knew there was no Mrs. Blackwood. Sophia always spoke that way, referring to the housekeeper or manager of each house where she worked. The guard at the entrance barely looked at them, simply checking Sophia's name on the list and gesturing with his head toward the path to the mansion on the hill. "It's huge!" Ruby exclaimed, stopping for a moment to admire the building. "Shh!" Sophia pulled her gently. "Let's go. I don't want to be late on my first day." Martha, the head housekeeper, was waiting at the service entrance. Her gaze passed quickly over Ruby, as if the girl were just a shadow accompanying Sophia. "Good morning. I'm Martha. I supervise the domestic staff. The agency said you have experience with large houses." "Yes, ma'am," Sophia replied, straightening her shoulders. "I worked for 7 years at the Turner residence and 3 at the Foster mansion." Martha nodded, satisfied. "Good. We have strict rules here. Mr. Blackwood demands perfection. And as for—" Her gaze landed briefly on Ruby. "How your daughter?" "She's very well behaved," Sophia hurried to say. "I promise she won't cause any trouble. She always stays with me." Martha seemed to assess the situation. "All right, but she must remain in the service areas. Never in the main rooms or living areas unless they are empty and being cleaned." "Understood." Sophia nodded several times. Of course. Perfectly understood." Ruby lowered her eyes. Already used to this kind of conversation, it was as if she wasn't there, as if she couldn't hear people talking about her. The first part of the morning passed quickly. Ruby followed her mother from one room to another, sitting quietly in a corner while Sophia cleaned. She observed everything with silent curiosity. The expensive paintings on the walls, the soft carpets, the shiny objects that seemed to come from another world. "This house has 22 rooms," one of the other cleaners commented during a break in the service area, "and only 2 people live here, the billionaire and his son." "The boy in the wheelchair?" added another. "John's poor thing, they say he was paralyzed in an accident, the same one that killed his mother." Ruby looked up from her drawing book, suddenly interested. "A boy lives here?" she asked, interrupting the adults' conversation. The women looked at her as if they had forgotten she was there. "Yes, dear," the oldest one replied after a moment of surprise. "Mr. Blackwood's son. He's about your age, I think." "Can I see him?" Ruby asked, her blue eyes shining with curiosity. "Ruby!" Sophia gently chided her. "Don't be nosy. The boy is not an attraction for you to look at." The girl lowered her head, embarrassed. But the idea that there was another child in that huge house never left her mind. After lunch, Sophia was assigned to clean the east wing. "The boy is having his math lesson now," Martha explained. "You can tidy up the playroom and the library, but be discreet and don't interrupt." Ruby followed her mother through the silent hallways. The east wing was different from the rest of the house. There were colors on the walls, pictures of animals, and a door decorated with golden stars. "Stay here in this corner and don't move," Sophia instructed, pointing to an armchair in the corner of the library as she began to dust the shelves. "And be quiet. There are people studying next door." Ruby nodded, sitting in the armchair with her drawing book. The library was impressive, with shelves that went from floor to ceiling. But what really captured her attention was the ajar door that led to the next room. Through the gap, she could see a boy in a wheelchair, looking without much interest at a teacher who was pointing at numbers on a board. The boy had brown hair and a pale face, as if he rarely went out in the sun. He looked sad. Ruby watched him for several minutes, fascinated. When the teacher turned his back to write something on the board, the boy looked toward the door. For an instant, his eyes met Ruby's. The girl smiled shyly, but the boy quickly looked away, as if he had seen something that wasn't supposed to be there. "Ruby, what are you looking at?" whispered Sophia, noticing her daughter's distraction. "The boy," she replied, also in a whisper. "He looks so lonely." Sophia sighed. "It's none of our business, honey. Let's just finish up here." Later, when the teacher left and Sophia was called to clean another room, Ruby was left alone in the library. The door to the study was now wide open, and she could see the boy sitting by the window, looking out at the garden. Without much thought, Ruby got up and walked silently to the door. She stopped at the entrance, unsure, clutching her drawing book. "Hi," she said in a low voice. The boy turned, surprised. His eyes, a deep brown, widened when he saw her. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a little hoarse, as if it wasn't used often. "I'm Ruby. My mum is cleaning your house today." The boy watched her for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to answer or call someone. "You're not supposed to be here," he said finally. "This is my study." "Sorry." Ruby took a step back, but didn't leave completely. "You're Lucas, right? I heard them talking about you." Lucas frowned. "What did they say?" Ruby hesitated. "That you live here with your dad, and that you have a cool wheelchair." She didn't mention the part about the accident or his mother. Even at 6, she knew some things shouldn't be said. "It's not cool," Lucas replied, looking at the chair. "It's just necessary." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Ruby was about to go back to the library when she noticed the open book on Lucas's lap. "Do you like adventure stories?" she asked, pointing to the book. Lucas looked at the book as if he'd forgotten it was there. "It's for my literature class. I have to read a chapter a day." "Can I see?" Before Lucas could answer, Ruby was already beside him, looking curiously at the pages. "There are a lot of hard words," she observed. "Do you understand all of them?" Lucas seemed slightly offended. "Of course I do. I've been reading advanced books since I was 4. "Wow," Ruby was genuinely impressed. "I only learned to read last year. My grandpa was teaching me, but then he got sick." Something in Lucas's face softened. "Your grandpa taught you things?" Ruby nodded, excited to have found a topic of conversation. "Lots of things. He was a teacher before he retired. He knew a ton of stories and could speak in several different languages." "What languages?" asked Lucas, now visibly interested. "French, Italian, a little German, and Spanish. He says languages are like keys that open doors to new worlds." Ruby smiled, happy to be talking about her grandfather. "He started teaching me too." Lucas was about to ask another question when footsteps approached down the hall. Quickly, Ruby retreated into the library. "Mr. Lucas, time for physical therapy," announced Martha, entering the room. She didn't notice Ruby hiding behind the ajar door. "Come on, doctor." "Chen is already waiting," Martha continued, helping Lucas adjust his wheelchair. Before leaving, Lucas glanced briefly toward the library, as if looking for the blonde girl. Ruby smiled and gave a discreet wave. To her surprise, Lucas almost managed to smile before being led down the hall. In the following days, Ruby eagerly awaited the moment when her mother would be assigned to clean the East Wing. She quickly learned Lucas's routine: lessons in the morning, physical therapy at noon, free time in his room, or the garden in the afternoon. On the 3rd day, she found him in the garden, alone under the gazebo while Martha talked with the gardener a few feet away. Can I sit with you?" Ruby asked, approaching cautiously. Lucas shrugged, which she took as a yes. She sat on the bench next to his wheelchair. "Why do you always follow me?" Lucas asked after a few moments of silence. Ruby thought for a moment before answering. "Because you look like you need a friend." "And so do I." "I have lots of friends," Lucas replied quickly, but without conviction. "Where are they?" Ruby asked, looking around the empty garden. Lucas didn't answer. His fingers fidgeted nervously with the hem of his jacket. "Want to see my drawings?" Ruby offered, opening her notebook. "I made one of you yesterday." Hesitantly, Lucas looked at the notebook. On the paper, with childish but careful strokes, Ruby had drawn a boy in a wheelchair under colorful trees with a big smile on his face. "I don't smile like that," Lucas commented, but his voice was softer. "Not yet," Ruby replied simply, "but you will one day." In the days that followed, Ruby continued to approach him whenever she could. Sometimes Lucas would ignore her or ask her to leave. Other times he would let her stay nearby, especially when he was in the garden or the library. A week after their first conversation, Ruby found Lucas in the music room, looking dejectedly at the grand piano he had never learned to play. "Want to play something?" she asked, entering the room hesitantly. "Play what?" he replied, without much enthusiasm. "We could play chess," Ruby suggested, pointing to the board on a nearby table. "My grandpa taught me a little." "You won't beat me," Lucas warned, but he was already moving his chair toward the table. "It doesn't matter who wins," Ruby replied, setting up the pieces. "The important thing is to have fun, right?" Lucas looked at her as if she had said something very strange. "But what's the point if it's not to win?" Ruby thought for a moment. "The point is not being alone," she answered finally. "Nobody likes to be alone all the time." Something in Lucas's expression changed. For an instant, the mask of indifference he always wore fell away, and Ruby could see the loneliness in his eyes. "White or black?" she asked, changing the subject. "White," Lucas replied, adjusting himself in his chair. "I'll go first." As they played, Ruby noticed that Lucas gradually relaxed. He explained moves to her when he realized she didn't know the rules properly, and even smiled once when she made a particularly clever move. "You're not as bad as I thought," he commented at the end of the game, which he obviously won. Ruby smiled, putting the pieces away. "You're a good teacher. Better than my grandpa, who always let me win." "That doesn't help anyone get better," Lucas observed. "He said that sometimes it's more important to be kind than to be right," Ruby replied. "But I think both ways have their value." From a distance, Martha watched the interaction with a puzzled expression. It was the first time she had seen Lucas voluntarily spend time with someone other than a teacher or doctor. When Sophia came to get Ruby at the end of the day, Martha called her for a private chat. "Your daughter has been with young Lucas today," she commented, her tone neutral. Sophia turned pale. "I'm so sorry. I promise it won't happen again." "I told her not to bother anyone." "Actually," Martha interrupted, "I'm not complaining. It's the first time I've seen the boy interact with another child. He seemed different." Sophia looked at the housekeeper in surprise. "Different how?" "Less withdrawn, almost like a normal child." Martha adjusted the pearl necklace she always wore. "If your daughter wishes to continue visiting him occasionally during her free time, I see no problem. As long as it doesn't interfere with his studies, of course." That night, lying in her small bed in the cramped apartment, Ruby told her mother about Lucas, how smart he was, how he could play chess perfectly, and how sad he seemed even when he wasn't crying. "He needs a friend, Mom," she concluded, hugging her teddy bear, "even if he doesn't know it yet." Sophia stroked her daughter's blonde hair. "You have a good heart, my love. But remember, we are just visitors in that house. Don't get too attached." But Ruby had already made up her mind. Lucas would be her friend, whether he wanted it or not. Everyone deserved to have at least one friend in the world, even rich, lonely boys who lived in mansions on a hill. The weeks passed, and summer slowly progressed. Ruby continued to accompany her mother to the Blackwood mansion almost every day. What started as occasional visits with Lucas became part of the house's routine. Martha, surprisingly, began to arrange Sophia's cleaning schedule so that Ruby could spend some time with Lucas after his lessons and physical therapy sessions. That July afternoon, the heat was intense. The sun shone brightly in the cloudless sky, making even the mansion's cooling system work at its limit. "Can we go to the garden?" Ruby asked, entering the library where Lucas was distractedly flipping through an astronomy book. "There's good shade near the pond." Lucas looked up. In recent weeks, his expression had subtly changed. The distant, empty gaze was occasionally replaced by a discreet spark of interest. "Martha said it's too hot outside. But there's that huge tree near the pond. It's much cooler there, please," Ruby insisted with her best smile. Lucas hesitated, but eventually nodded. "All right, I'll ask for permission." To their surprise, Martha agreed easily. "Just stay in the shade and take water," she instructed, helping Lucas adjust a hat he rarely wore. "I'll be checking on you from the kitchen window." The Blackwood Mansion's garden was a small landscaped paradise, perfectly manicured lawns stretched for acres, interrupted by beds of exotic flowers and centuries-old trees. In the center, a man-made pond reflected the blue sky, with a small arched bridge crossing its narrowest part. Ruby pushed Lucas's wheelchair along the polished stone path, chatting excitedly about a book she had found in the library. And then the knight realized the dragon didn't want to hurt him. It was just protecting its treasure, she explained, gesturing with her free hand. Isn't it amazing how we sometimes judge people wrong? Or dragons, in this case. Lucas smiled slightly. Smiles were still rare, but they happened more often now. They reached the large tree near the pond. It was an ancient oak, with thick branches that stretched in every direction, creating a cool and welcoming shade. Ruby helped position Lucas's chair in a comfortable spot before sitting on the grass beside him. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, watching the birds flying over the pond and the colorful fish that occasionally leaped from the water. "It's beautiful here," Ruby commented. "Do you come here often?" Lucas shook his head. "Not really. I usually stay inside." "Why? It's so lovely outside." Lucas didn't answer immediately. His fingers played with the edge of his shirt, a habit Ruby had noticed when he was nervous or thoughtful. "Do you have other friends at school?" Lucas asked suddenly, his voice almost a whisper. Ruby tilted her head, surprised by the question. "A few. There's Lily, who sits with me at lunch, and Max, who lives in my building." "Why?" Lucas looked at the pond, avoiding her eyes. "Just curious." Something in his voice made Ruby realize it wasn't just curiosity. She gently touched his arm. "What about you? Do you have any friends besides me?" The silence that followed was longer this time. A gentle breeze rustled the branches above them, creating patterns of light and shadow on Lucas's pale face. "So I don't have any friends," he said finally, his voice so low that Ruby had to lean in to hear. "Nobody likes to play with me because I'm in a wheelchair." The words came out as if they had been held back for a long time, painful to finally release. Ruby felt a tightness in her chest but remained silent, instinctively knowing that Lucas needed to continue. "Before the accident, I had a few friends. We went to preschool together. We had birthday parties." His voice wavered a bit. "Afterward, they stopped coming. At first, their mums would bring cards and gifts, then not even that." "What accident?" Ruby asked softly, though she already knew a little from the cleaner's conversation. Lucas took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. His eyes filled with tears he fought to hold back. "We were coming back from my grandma's house. My mum was driving." He paused, swallowing hard. It was raining really hard. Another car skidded and hit ours. We rolled over several times. A tear escaped, running down Lucas's cheek. He quickly wiped it away. "I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. My dad was there with an expression I had never seen before. He told me that Mom didn't make it." Lucas's voice trembled, "and that I would never walk again." Ruby felt her own eyes well up with tears. Without a second thought, she held Lucas's hand in hers. The doctors tried everything," he continued, now looking at his motionless legs. "Surgeries, special treatments. My dad brought specialists from other countries, but the spinal cord injury was too severe. They say it's permanent." "I'm so sorry," Ruby murmured, gently squeezing his hand. "After that, everything changed. My dad started working even more, had always traveling. People started treating me differently, like I was made of glass, or worse, like I wasn't even there. The few friends I had stopped coming over. I think their mums didn't know what to say, or maybe they were afraid their kids would ask uncomfortable questions." Lucas looked directly at Ruby for the first time since he had started talking. "Sometimes, I think that's why my dad stays away. Looking at me reminds him of her, and of what we lost." Silence fell between them again, filled only by the soft sound of the water and the wind in the leaves. Ruby looked at Lucas's face, seeing not the rich boy in an expensive wheelchair, but a child as lonely and hurt as any other could be. "My grandpa says that pain is like a weight," Ruby said finally. "When you carry it alone, it feels impossible to bear. But when you share it with someone, it gets a little lighter." Lucas looked at her with curiosity. "Your grandpa seems to know a lot of things." "He's very wise," Ruby agreed. "And he also says that real friends are like stars. You can't always see them, but you know they're there." Slowly, hesitantly, As if testing something new and fragile, Lucas smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Thanks for listening to me," he said. "I've never told anyone this before." Ruby squeezed his hand one more time before letting go. She stood up, determined, and faced Lucas. "I promise I'll never leave you," she declared solemnly, with all the seriousness her 6 years could muster. "We'll be friends forever, no matter what. It's a promise." Lucas stared at her, surprised by the intensity of her words. Something about this blonde girl with bright eyes, this child that all the other adults barely noticed, touched a part of his heart he thought he had lost in the accident. "Really promise?" he asked, his voice betraying a vulnerability he usually hid from everyone. "Promise." Ruby extended her pinky finger. "Pinky promise." "It's the most sacred of all." Lucas hesitated for a moment before linking his pinky with hers. "Pinky promise, then?" That afternoon, under the shade of the old oak tree, something changed between them. They were no longer just two lonely children seeking momentary companionship. A bond had formed, still fragile, like all beginnings, but real. When Martha came to get them an hour later, she found something she had never seen before. Lucas laughing openly as Ruby told a funny story, gesturing animatedly. The housekeeper stopped a few feet away, not wanting to interrupt the moment. In all her years at the Blackwood mansion, she had never heard the sound of Lucas's genuine laughter. And for the first time, she wondered if the little blonde intruder might be exactly what this somber house needed. The summer days continued, hot and sunny at the Blackwood mansion. After their conversation under the oak tree, something had shifted between Lucas and Ruby. The invisible barrier Lucas kept around himself began to gradually dissolve, like ice exposed to the gentle warmth of spring. Martha, the housekeeper, observed this transformation with discreet interest. Without telling anyone, she had modified the household routine to accommodate the two children's meetings. The cleaning schedule for the East Wing mysteriously coincided with Lucas's free time after his lessons. The game room, once rarely used, was now cleaned exactly when Lucas finished his daily physical therapy. "I have a surprise for you today," Martha announced on a Thursday morning, entering Lucas's room as he finished his breakfast. Lucas looked up, curious. Martha wasn't the type to have surprises. "I've asked the gardeners to prepare a picnic in the gazebo. I thought you and little Ruby could have lunch there today, since the weather is nice." "A picnic?" Lucas couldn't hide his excitement. He had never been on a picnic before. "Yes, I thought it would be a welcome change of pace, Doctor. Chen also mentioned it would be good for you to spend more time outdoors." Martha adjusted the pearl necklace she always wore, as she did when she was slightly uncomfortable. "Of course, if you'd prefer to have lunch inside as usual." "No," Lucas interrupted quickly. "The picnic sounds great." "Thank you, Martha." A faint smile crossed the housekeeper's lips before she returned to her usual professional expression. "Excellent. Everything will be ready at noon." When Ruby arrived with Sophia that morning, Martha intercepted her in the service hallway. "Young Mr. Lucas will be having a picnic in the gazebo today. He asked if you would like to join him for lunch." Ruby's blue eyes widened with excitement. "Can I really, Mum? Please?" Sophia looked uncertainly at Martha, who gave a discreet nod. "Of course, honey, as long as you behave." The morning seemed to drag on for both children. Lucas tried to concentrate on his history lessons, but his thoughts kept drifting to the planned picnic. Ruby, as she followed her mother through the mansion's corridors, could barely contain her energy, bouncing instead of walking. At noon, when the sun was high in the clear sky, Martha took Lucas to the garden gazebo. The gardeners had transformed the space. A large checkered blanket covered the wooden floor, colorful cushions were scattered strategically, and a traditional picnic basket sat in the center. "The girl should be here shortly," Martha informed him, helping Lucas transfer from his wheelchair to the cushions. "Ring the bell if you need anything." Lucas nodded, a strange feeling of anticipation growing in his chest. Since the conversation under the oak tree, where he had opened his heart to Ruby, something had changed. Her presence was no longer just a momentary distraction from loneliness. It had become something he actively looked forward to. "Lucas!" Ruby's cheerful voice pulled him from his thoughts. She was running along the stone path, her blonde hair shining in the sun. She wore a simple light blue dress and was holding something in her hands. "Look what I brought." She plopped down on the cushions next to him, breathless and smiling, and held out a small package wrapped in colorful paper. "What's this?" Lucas asked, taking the package hesitantly. "A present." "Open it." Lucas carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal a small book with a worn leather cover, Tales from Around the World. He read the title aloud. "It was my grandpa's," Ruby explained, leaning over to open the book. "They're stories from different countries. He used to read them to me when I was little." "Well, smaller than I am now," she corrected herself with a giggle. Lucas flipped through the yellowed pages, noticing the simple yet charming illustrations that accompanied each story. "Are you sure you want to lend this to me? It seems important to you." "I'm not lending it," Ruby replied simply. "I'm giving it to you." "I have other books from Grandpa, but I thought you would like this one." Lucas looked at her, surprised. He was used to receiving expensive gifts from his father, tablets, video game consoles, tech toys, but never something as personal as another child's treasured book. Thank you," he said finally, closing the book carefully. "And I'll take good care of it." "I know you will," Ruby smiled. "Now, what's in that basket? I'm starving." Martha had prepared a feast fit for children, sandwiches cut into fun shapes, fresh fruit, homemade cookies, natural juices in colorful bottles, and even small cupcakes decorated with colored frosting. "Wow," Ruby exclaimed. "This looks like food from a movie." Lucas smiled, realizing she was right. Meals at the Blackwood mansion were always elaborate but formal, dishes served on fine china, silver cutlery, linen napkins, never fun like this. As they ate, Ruby kept the conversation flowing, talking about a documentary on dolphins she had watched on the TV in the staff lounge. Lucas listened attentively, occasionally asking questions or adding facts he had learned from his own books. "Can we play something after?" Ruby asked when they finished eating. "I brought this too." She pulled a small cloth bag from the purse she was carrying. "What is it?" "Memory game," she announced, spreading small colorful cards on the blanket. "My grandpa made it for me. They're pairs of animals from different parts of the world." Lucas examined the cards, noticing the detailed drawings of animals he recognized from his books: lions, pandas, toucans, koalas. "Are the rules the same as the normal game?" he asked, arranging the cards in rows. "Yes, but there's an extra challenge. When you find a pair, you have to say something about the animal. If you don't know, you lose the pair." Lucas smiled confidently. "This will be easy. I've been reading animal encyclopedias since I was 4. "We'll see," Ruby replied with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "I'll start." The game progressed quickly, with both children showing good memory. Lucas, as expected, had an impressive knowledge of the animals, sharing facts about habitats and behaviors that surprised even Ruby. "Your turn," Ruby said, after stacking her 5th pair, 2 giraffes. Lucas flipped a card, revealing an elephant. Concentrating, he scanned the remaining cards, trying to remember where he had seen its match. He flipped another card. A frog. "Not a match," he said, disappointed. "My turn, then." Ruby leaned forward, flipping a card with a penguin. Her eyes lit up as she remembered where the match was. She flipped the second card, another penguin. "I found it!" she exclaimed triumphantly. Penguins are birds that can't fly. They live mostly in Antarctica, and the parents take turns incubating the eggs. The males watch the eggs while the females go hunting. They are très mignons. Lucas frowned, confused. "What did you say at the end?" Ruby covered her mouth with her hand, seeming surprised at herself. "Oh, I said they are très mignons. It means very cute in French." "You speak French?" Lucas asked, his eyes wide with surprise. "A little," Ruby replied, suddenly shy. "My grandpa taught me some words. He used to be a language teacher before he retired." "That's amazing," Lucas exclaimed, a spark of genuine admiration appearing in his eyes. "Can you teach me how to say something?" Ruby smiled, clearly happy with his interest. "Of course. How about we start with a greeting?" "Bonjour" means hello. "Bonjour," Lucas repeated carefully, trying to imitate her pronunciation. "Very good. Now try Je m'appelle Lucas. Je m'appelle Lucas, he repeated, savoring the sound of the foreign words. What does it mean? My name is Lucas, Ruby translated, and if you want to be polite, you can say, Enchanté de faire votre connaissance. It means pleased to meet you. Lucas tried to repeat the longer phrase, stumbling a bit over the words. Ruby laughed, but not in a mean way. Almost. Try again, slower. Lucas practiced the phrase a few times until he could pronounce it correctly. His face beamed with satisfaction when he finally got it right. "There's how many languages do you know?" he asked, completely forgetting about the memory game. Ruby counted on her fingers. "Well, I speak English, of course. I learned a lot of French because my grandpa lived in Paris when he was young. I know some words in Italian and Spanish too, and a little bit of German, but that's harder." Lucas stared at her with genuine amazement. In his entire privileged life, with the best tutors money could hire, he had never learned another language besides English. His teachers always focused on math, science, classic literature, skills that, according to his father, would be useful for running the family business one day. "How did you learn all that?" he asked, unable to hide the admiration in his voice. Ruby shrugged, as if it were no big deal. "My grandpa says languages are doors to other worlds. He started teaching me when I was very little, with songs and stories. He says kids learn faster than adults." "Your grandpa sounds amazing," Lucas commented. A shadow passed over Ruby's face. "He is, but he's sick now. He lives in a place where doctors take care of him all the time." "I'm sorry," Lucas said, recognizing the sadness in her eyes, the same he saw in his own reflection when he thought of his mother. "It's okay. Mum says he's in good hands. We visit whenever we can," Ruby replied, forcing a smile. "Want to learn more words in French?" Lucas nodded enthusiastically. "Can you teach me the numbers?" For the next hour, the memory game was completely forgotten as Ruby taught Lucas the numbers in French, then colors, and finally some simple phrases. He absorbed everything with surprising speed, repeating each word carefully until he got the pronunciation right. "How you learn so fast," Ruby praised when Lucas managed to count from 1 to 20 without a mistake. "It's easy when you explain it," he replied, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "It feels fun. I never thought learning could be fun." Martha appeared on the stone path, walking toward the gazebo. "Time for your session with Dr. Chen, Lucas," she announced. Lucas looked at Ruby, disappointment clear on his face. "I have to go. Physical therapy." "It's okay," Ruby replied, starting to collect the game cards. "We can continue tomorrow. I'll think of more things to teach you." "Promise?" Lucas asked, as Martha helped him back into his wheelchair. "Promise," Ruby answered with a smile. "Au revoir, Lucas." "Au revoir, Ruby," he replied, carefully pronouncing the foreign words. As Martha pushed his wheelchair back to the house, Lucas couldn't stop mentally repeating the words he had learned. For some reason, they felt special, like little treasures Ruby had shared exclusively with him. In his physical therapy session, Dr. Chen noticed something different. "You seem cheerful today, Lucas," he commented while helping him with arm exercises. "I learned French," Lucas answered proudly. "Vraiment, c'est magnifique," the doctor replied with a smile. Lucas's eyes widened. "You speak French too?" "A little. I studied in Lyon for a year during my specialization," Dr. Chen explained. "So who's teaching you?" "Ruby," Lucas answered. "She knows a lot of languages." Dr. Chen nodded, a knowing smile on his face. "It's good to see you interested in something new. It's good for the mind and for the spirit." That night, for the first time in a long time, Lucas asked to speak with his father on their nightly video call. "Hi, Dad," he asked when Thomas Blackwood's tired face appeared on the screen. "Can we hire a language teacher for me?" Thomas seemed surprised. "Languages? Why the sudden interest?" "Ruby is teaching me French," Lucas explained. "It's interesting. I want to learn more." A strange expression crossed Thomas's face, something between surprise and curiosity. "Ruby, the new cleaner's daughter?" "Yes, she speaks several languages. Her grandpa was a teacher." Thomas was silent for a moment, as if processing the information. Well, if it's something you want to learn, I can arrange it. I'll speak with Martha to find a good tutor. Thanks, Dad, Lucas replied, trying to hide the excitement in his voice. He didn't want to seem too eager. His father was often suspicious of strong emotions, as if they were signs of weakness. How are the exercises with Dr. Chen? Thomas asked, changing the subject. They're fine. He said my arms are getting stronger. The conversation continued for a few minutes, with Thomas asking the usual questions about health, studies, and therapy. But Lucas was barely listening. His mind was busy with the French words he had learned, repeating them silently so he wouldn't forget. When the call ended, Lucas opened the book Ruby had given him, Tales from Around the World. He flipped to a French story, La Petite Fille et les Étoiles, The Little Girl and the Stars. He tried to read the French words in the title, imagining what it would be like to understand the whole text. A strange, new feeling grew in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It was hope. For the first time since the accident, Lucas was genuinely excited about something, looking forward to the next day, curious to discover more. The world that had closed in on him when he lost his mobility suddenly seemed to be opening up again, not through his legs, but through words. Words in other languages that could take him to places his wheels could never reach. Autumn arrived at the Blackwood mansion, painting the garden in shades of red and gold. Lucas's regular classes had resumed after the summer break, but now his schedule included something new. Daily lessons with Ruby. Martha, surprisingly, had formalized these meetings. After Thomas Blackwood agreed to hire a language teacher for his son, the housekeeper made an unusual decision. "Why don't we start with Ruby as an initial tutor?" she suggested during a video call with Lucas's father. "The boy responds well to her, and it could be a good transition period until we find the right professor." Thomas, busy as always, just nodded distractedly. "Whatever, as long as it doesn't interfere with his main studies. And make sure she is compensated properly." So every afternoon after physical therapy, Lucas and Ruby had an official hour for their language lessons. Martha made the game room available, a large space on the second floor that was rarely used before. Sophia, Ruby's mother, received a small addition to her salary, which made a big difference in the family's tight budget. "On how are we starting today?" Lucas asked, positioning his chair next to the large round table where Ruby had already spread out various colorful objects. The girl's blue eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as she organized the materials. "I thought we'd start with something fun." "A game!" She pulled a board made of colorful cardboard from her backpack, clearly handmade, with drawn squares forming a winding path. "What is that?" Lucas asked, leaning in for a better look. "The language game," Ruby announced proudly. "I made it last night. See, each color represents a different language." Lucas looked at the board, noticing the squares were painted in 7 different colors: blue, red, green, yellow, purple, orange, and pink. Blue is French, red is Spanish, green is Italian, yellow is German, purple is Russian, orange is Japanese, and pink is Mandarin, Ruby explained, pointing to each section. "So when you land on a square, you have to learn a new word in that language." "You know all those languages?" Lucas asked, impressed. Ruby laughed. "Not all of them fluently. I know a lot of French, Spanish, and Italian, a little German. The others, just a few words I learned from my grandpa. He says it's important to at least know what each language sounds like. And how do we play?" "With this die." Ruby showed him a die made of cardstock. "You roll it, move that number of spaces, and learn the word for that color. If you can use the word in a sentence, you get an extra point." Lucas's eyes lit up with an excitement he rarely showed. "Let's start." For the next hour, the sound of laughter filled the room as the children played. Lucas threw himself into the game with an intensity that surprised even Ruby. Each new word was repeated carefully until the pronunciation was perfect. He insisted on writing everything down in a notebook Martha had provided, especially for these lessons. "Sagato," Lucas repeated after landing on a green square. "Cat" in Italian. "Very good," Ruby applauded. Now try to use it in a sentence. Lucas thought for a moment. Il gatto è small. Almost, it would be il gatto è piccolo. Ruby corrected gently. Il gatto è piccolo, Lucas repeated, carefully writing the sentence in his notebook. In the following days, Ruby brought different methods for each lesson. Monday was game day, Tuesday was music day, Wednesday was story day, Thursday was movie day, and Friday was the day Lucas showed what he had learned. Today we're going to learn with music, Ruby announced on a Tuesday, connecting a small portable radio she had brought. My grandpa always said that songs help fix words in your memory. She pressed the play button, and a cheerful melody filled the room. It was a French children's song about the days of the week. Ruby began to sing along, gesturing animatedly for Lucas to join in. Initially shy, Lucas just watched, but by the second chorus he started to mumble the words. By the third repetition, he was singing along with Ruby, his eyes shining with joy. Lundi, mardi, mercredi, jeudi, vendredi, samedi, dimanche. They sang together, Ruby clapping to the rhythm and Lucas tapping along on the arms of his chair. When the song ended, they both burst out laughing. That was fun, Lucas said, sounding surprised by his own statement. Ruby smiled. Learning should be fun. My grandpa always said that. On Wednesdays, Ruby brought children's books in different languages. Sitting side by side in the large game room window, she would read simple stories, pointing to the illustrations and teaching new words. So this one is Le Petit Prince, Ruby explained, showing a worn book with the image of a blonde boy on a small planet. It's one of my grandpa's favorite books. He read it to me so many times I've memorized parts of it. Lucas watched, fascinated, as Ruby read passages in French, translating afterward so he could understand. The story of the lonely little prince on his distant planet touched something inside him. He's like me, he commented quietly, alone in his own world. Ruby looked at him with her big blue eyes. But just like the prince found the fox and the pilot, you found me. Nobody has to be alone forever. Lucas's eyes shone with a new understanding. Can you read more? On Thursdays, Martha allowed them to use the mansion's movie theater to watch cartoons and children's films in different languages. Lucas, who had previously shown little interest in the expensive electronics his father gave him, now eagerly awaited these sessions. I understood what he said, Lucas exclaimed during a cartoon in Spanish. As he asked where the treasure was, Ruby smiled, proud. See, you're already getting the hang of it. Fridays quickly became their favorite day. Lucas would prepare little presentations to show what he had learned during the week. Ruby would sit as an attentive audience while he recited vocabulary, sang snippets of songs, or read short sentences from the books they had studied. Molto bene. Ruby would applaud when he completed a sentence in Italian without a mistake. Danke schön, Lucas would reply, using the German they had practiced. Martha, who occasionally watched these lessons discreetly from the ajar door, couldn't help but notice the transformation. The sullen, apathetic boy she had known for years was disappearing, replaced by a lively and curious child. In the following weeks, Lucas surprised everyone with his ability to absorb the new languages. His memory, always good for facts and numbers, proved to be exceptional for languages. After just 1 month, he could already hold simple conversations in French and Spanish, understand basic passages in Italian and German, and recognize words in Russian, Japanese, and Mandarin. How do you learn so fast? Ruby asked one day, genuinely impressed with his progress. Lucas shrugged, but couldn't hide his satisfied smile. I don't know, it's like my brain was waiting for this, like the words just find their place naturally. Dr. Chen, Lucas's physical therapist, noticed changes not only in his mood, but also in his effort during therapy sessions. You're trying harder, he commented during a particularly difficult exercise. I have to get strong, Lucas replied with determination. Ruby said that in Italy, people talk a lot with their hands. I need strong arms to speak Italian properly. The doctor laughed, exchanging a meaningful look with Martha, who was watching the session. They both knew something extraordinary was happening. At home, Ruby practiced tirelessly. With her mother's help, she made flashcards, drew illustrations, and prepared games for the lessons. Sophia watched her daughter's dedication with a mix of pride and concern. "You're taking this very seriously," she commented one night, as Ruby colored cards with Spanish words. "Lucas needs me, Mom," Ruby answered simply. "He's my friend, and he's learning so fast. I don't want to disappoint him." Sophia hugged her daughter, noticing how her eyes shone when she spoke of the boy. "You have a heart of gold, sweetie. Just remember that you live in different worlds." Ruby shook her head. "Not anymore. Now we have our own world, a world with many languages." In the third month of lessons, something extraordinary happened. Lucas began to teach Ruby. During a study session where they were practicing Russian, he gently corrected her pronunciation. "It's spasiba, not spasibo," he explained. "The A is softer." Ruby stared at him, surprised. "How do you know that? I only taught you the basics of Russian." Lucas looked slightly embarrassed. "I asked Martha to buy me some books and audio CDs. I've been studying at night after everyone goes to sleep." A feeling of pure joy washed over Ruby. The boy who had barely shown interest in anything before meeting her was now learning on his own, driven by genuine curiosity. "That's amazing, Lucas," she exclaimed, hugging him impulsively. It was the first time she had done that, and for a moment they both seemed surprised by the gesture. Lucas smiled shyly. "I found out I can download language apps on the tablet my dad gave me. It has lessons in all the languages we're studying." From that day on, the lessons transformed. It was no longer just Ruby teaching Lucas, but two children exploring new worlds together, each contributing their knowledge and discoveries. As the months passed, the initial 7 languages began to be part of their daily communication. They would speak French on Mondays, Spanish on Tuesdays, Italian on Wednesdays, German on Thursdays, and mix words from Russian, Japanese, and Mandarin on Fridays. "Bonjour, mon ami," Ruby would greet him when she arrived for Monday's lesson. "Buenos dias, señorita," Lucas would reply on Tuesdays. "Guten Tag," they would say in unison on Thursdays, bursting into laughter right after. What started as simple vocabulary lessons turned into true cultural journeys. Ruby brought information about the countries where the languages were spoken, and together they explored traditions, typical foods, and customs. "In France, people eat snails," Ruby explained, showing an illustration in one of her books. "In Japan, it's rude to stick your chopsticks into your rice bowl," Lucas commented, sharing something he had learned in his nightly studies. For Lucas's birthday, which coincided with the 6th month of their lessons, Ruby prepared a special surprise. With the help of Martha, who had become a silent ally in their linguistic adventures, she decorated the game room with flags from the 7 countries whose languages they were studying. "Feliz cumpleaños! Buon compleanno! Joyeux anniversaire!" she exclaimed as Lucas entered the room, pushing his wheelchair faster than usual in his haste to get to the day's lesson. The boy's eyes widened at the sight of the decorations. On a table in the center, 7 small gifts were lined up, each wrapped in paper of the corresponding color from the game they had created. "What is all this?" he asked, genuinely surprised. His birthday was rarely celebrated beyond a cake served after dinner and expensive gifts sent by his father, who was usually traveling on that date. "A gift for each language you've learned," Ruby explained, practically bouncing with excitement. "Open them." One by one, Lucas unwrapped the gifts. A small French phrasebook, a bracelet with the colors of the Spanish flag, a pencil holder with Italian designs, a German cuckoo clock keychain, a small Russian doll, a Japanese origami crane, and a small pendant with a Chinese symbol. "What does it mean?" he asked, holding the pendant. "Courage," Ruby replied. "Because you're the bravest person I know." Lucas's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, as so many times before, but of an emotion he almost no longer recognized, happiness. "Thank you," he said in a low voice. Then, as if making a decision, he continued, "Merci, grazie, danke, spasiba, arigato, dziękuję." Ruby smiled, her blue eyes shining. "You're welcome, in all the languages." That afternoon, as they shared a cake that Martha had specially prepared, Lucas realized something had changed within him. The languages he had learned weren't just words and sounds. They were bridges to a world beyond the mansion walls and the limitations of his wheelchair. And Ruby, the girl everyone ignored, who glided through the corridors like an almost invisible shadow, had become the most important person in his life. She had brought color to his grey world, sound to his silence, and something that not all the doctors and therapists had managed to give him: hope. "You know something?" Lucas said, watching Ruby arrange the gifts carefully on his desk. "What?" "I think you're magic," he declared, with the sincerity only a child possesses. "You make impossible things happen." Ruby laughed, shaking her head. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight streaming through the window, creating a sort of golden halo around her. "It's not magic, Lucas. It's just friendship, the real kind." Spring arrived at the Blackwood mansion, bringing flowers to the garden and an even more remarkable transformation within its walls. It had been almost a year since Ruby had entered Lucas's life, and the change was visible to everyone. "Listen to that," commented Maria, one of the cleaners, as she tidied the second-floor hallways. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the house, drifting down the stairs and filling spaces once dominated by silence. "Who would have thought this house would one day have life? It's like someone opened all the windows at once," agreed James, the oldest gardener, who had worked for the Blackwoods since before Lucas was born. Not just the real windows, but something more. The mansion, which had always seemed too large and empty, now had a center of gravity, the second-floor game room, from which radiated sounds of music, conversations in multiple languages, and above all, laughter. The staff, who used to walk the halls with silent steps and serious expressions, now paused occasionally, involuntary smiles appearing on their faces as they listened to the two children. "Did you see that? The bluebird is back in the garden!" Lucas's voice exclaimed one morning, mixing Spanish and English in his excitement as he watched from the library window. "It's beautiful. It's the same one from last week, I'm sure of it," Ruby replied, running to see Martha, passing by in the hallway with a stack of clean towels, stopped for a moment. Her face, usually serious and composed, softened. She had worked at the mansion for 7 years, and for most of that time, silence had been her constant companion. Now, she had to constantly remind herself to maintain her professional demeanor when she passed the game room and heard Lucas laughing, a sound she had long believed she would never hear. "Young Mr. Lucas has requested a picnic today," she informed the cook, "for him and Miss Ruby, in the gazebo like last time." "Another one," the cook smiled. "That's the third this week. At least now he actually eats what I prepare. Before, the food came back almost untouched. The picnics had become frequent. From Martha's office, you could see the two children in the gazebo, Lucas in his wheelchair and Ruby by his side, often reading something or playing one of the many games they invented together. The housekeeper realized she now planned her day to be near the window at these times, something she would never admit out loud. "Have you noticed he's stronger?" Dr. Chen commented during one of his weekly visits. "His arms have developed significant muscle, and his posture has improved." "He's been using the chair much more," Martha replied. "He's always going from one place to another with that girl. The library, the garden, the music room. It's not just that," the doctor smiled. "It's motivation. He wants to move. He wants to explore. Before, the chair was a prison. Now, it's freedom." The transformation wasn't just physical. Lucas's private tutors reported remarkable changes in his academic performance. The boy who once answered questions mechanically, without showing real interest, now made connections, asked questions, and explored possibilities. He connected the Roman history lesson to something about the Roman Empire he apparently learned in Italian, the history tutor commented, clearly impressed. And then he made a comparison to the Japanese political system. Where does a 6-year-old learn these things? Sophia, Ruby's mother, watched the transformation with a mix of pride and concern. Her daughter, once practically invisible to the people in the mansion, was now greeted by name. The same staff members who used to look right through her months ago now asked about her lessons with Lucas. "Your daughter has a special gift," Martha commented one afternoon as Sophia cleaned the third-floor hallways. "I've never seen the boy like this." "Ruby has always been good with people," Sophia replied simply. "She sees beyond appearances." The most impressive change, however, was visible in the quietest moments. In the staff dining room, the frequent topic of conversation was the small transformations everyone noticed. "Did you see that he asked for his meals to be served in the main dining room now instead of his room?" one of the maids commented. "And he wears colorful clothes. Before it was always those dark, serious shades, like he was a miniature adult," added another. "He was singing yesterday," exclaimed the driver, who rarely came inside the house. "I was waiting in the hall and I heard it clearly. A French song, I think." James, the gardener, perhaps expressed the change best. One afternoon while pruning the roses, he saw the two children crossing the garden, Lucas propelling his own chair with growing confidence, Ruby by his side, both chatting animatedly in a mix of English and other languages. "It's like the house has woken up," he commented to no one in particular. "Like it's been asleep all this time, just waiting." And indeed, the Blackwood mansion seemed different. The same walls, the same luxurious hallways, the same expensive furniture, but now filled with an energy that no amount of wealth could buy. The friendship of two children, one in a wheelchair and the other whom everyone used to ignore, had achieved what seemed impossible. It had brought light to a place of shadows, laughter where there was once only silence, and color to a world that had for too long existed only in shades of gray. The helicopter landed on the sprawling lawn of the Blackwood mansion at precisely 6 in the evening. Thomas Blackwood disembarked quickly, adjusting his immaculate suit as he walked toward the house. His expression, as always, was serious and composed, the same one that appeared on the covers of business magazines and at international conferences. "Welcome back, Mr. Blackwood," greeted Martha, who was waiting for him at the entrance. "Did you have a good trip?" "Productive," he replied curtly, handing his briefcase to one of the assistants accompanying him. "How is Lucas?" "Very well, sir. He's waiting in his room. He heard you were coming today and was quite excited." Thomas raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. Lucas rarely showed any emotion when he returned from his trips, something Thomas had grown accustomed to over the years, though he had never truly accepted it. "Dinner at 7:30, he ordered, heading for the stairs. "In the main dining room?" Martha nodded, hiding her surprise. Thomas almost never used the main dining room when he was home, preferring to have quick meals in his office while he worked. Upon entering his son's room, Thomas found an unexpected scene. Instead of being in bed or in front of the television as usual, Lucas was at his desk, surrounded by books and colorful papers, writing intently in a notebook. "How's Lucas, he called, his voice softening slightly. The boy turned quickly, a smile lighting up his face. Another surprise. "Dad, you're here." Thomas approached, noticing the open books. Titles in different languages caught his eye. "Studying hard, I see." "Yes. I've been learning so many new things." The excitement in Lucas's voice was something Thomas hadn't heard in years, perhaps since before the accident. "Martha told me you have a new language tutor," he commented, picking up one of the books, a children's Italian dictionary. "Sort of," Lucas replied, carefully closing his notebook. "Are you having dinner with me tonight?" "Yes, in the dining room," Thomas confirmed, observing his son with renewed curiosity. There was something different about him, not just the unusual enthusiasm, but something in his posture, in his eyes, a liveliness that wasn't there before. "Can I wear my new blue shirt?" Lucas asked, surprising his father again. Thomas nodded, unable to completely hide his astonishment. Lucas had never shown any interest in his appearance before. "Of course. I'll ask Martha to help you get ready." At 7:30 sharp, Thomas entered the dining room. The long mahogany table, which could comfortably seat 20 people, was set at one end with just 2 places. Crystal, silverware, and fine china sparkled under the light of the chandelier. Thomas rarely used this room since the death of Eleanor. his wife and Lucas's mother. The memories of family dinners were too painful. Lucas arrived moments later, pushing his own wheelchair, another detail that did not go unnoticed by Thomas. Usually, the boy needed help to get around the house. "You look sharp," Thomas commented as a butler helped Lucas position himself at the table. "Grazie, Papa," Lucas replied with a smile. Thomas frowned, surprised. "Did you just speak Italian?" "Sì, ho imparato molte lingue quest'anno," Lucas continued, clearly proud of himself. The first course was served, an asparagus soup that Lucas tasted with an appetite, which was also uncommon before. Thomas watched his son with growing curiosity. "So you're studying Italian," he commented, trying to keep the conversation casual. "Sai Italian, French, Spanish, German, a little Russian, Japanese, and Mandarin," Lucas replied naturally, as if learning 7 languages was something any 6-year-old would do. Thomas nearly choked on his soup. 7 languages, in less than a year? Lucas nodded, beaming. Some languages are easier than others. French and Spanish are simpler because they have Latin roots like Italian. German is a bit harder. Russian has a different alphabet, and Japanese and Mandarin are the most complicated because they use characters instead of letters. Thomas set down his spoon, giving his full attention to his son. In all his years as a father, he had never heard Lucas talk so much at once, let alone with such enthusiasm and knowledge. "Can you show me?" he asked, genuinely interested. Lucas smiled and began an impressive demonstration. He counted to 10 in French, recited a short poem in Spanish, said a few phrases in Italian, named objects on the table in German, greeted his father in Russian, thanked him for the meal in Japanese, and finally said something that sounded like a quote in Mandarin. Thomas was stunned. The quiet, withdrawn boy he knew had transformed into an articulate and confident child before his very eyes. "C'est délicieux, n'est-ce pas?" Lucas commented, pointing to the main course that had just been served, grilled salmon with a herb sauce. "Pardon?" Thomas asked, still processing what he was witnessing. "I asked in French if it's delicious," Lucas translated naturally. "Yes, it's excellent," Thomas replied distractedly, his mind racing. Then, the question escaped his lips before he could stop it. "Who taught you this?" Lucas's smile widened, his eyes shining with genuine pride. "It was Ruby." "Ruby?" Thomas repeated, trying to recall a tutor with that name Martha might have hired. "Your language teacher." "Not exactly a teacher," Lucas explained, carefully cutting a piece of salmon. "Ruby is my friend, the daughter of Sophia, the cleaner. She's 6 years old, but she knows a lot of languages because her grandpa was a professor." Thomas fell silent, absorbing the information. All this time, he thought Lucas was taking lessons with some expensive professional tutor Martha had hired per his instructions. He never imagined that his son's transformation was due to a 6-year-old girl, the daughter of a cleaner. "Does Ruby come every day?" he finally asked. "Yes, after physical therapy. Martha arranged our schedules." Lucas took a sip of water before continuing. "We started with games, then songs. Now we're working on little plays in different languages. Yesterday we rehearsed a scene from Little Red Riding Hood in Spanish." Thomas didn't know what to say. Part of him, the pragmatic and controlling businessman, felt annoyed that he hadn't been consulted about this unusual arrangement. But another part, the father who secretly longed to see some joy in his son's face, was amazed by the result. "And you enjoy these?" "Lessons?" he asked, choosing his words carefully. "They're the best hours of my day," Lucas answered with disarming honesty. "Ruby makes everything fun. She says learning is like opening doors to new worlds, and each language is a different key." Thomas watched his son as he continued to talk about memory games in Italian, songs in French, and stories in Spanish. The animation in his voice, the way he gestured as he spoke, the straight posture in his chair, it was all new, and at the same time, painfully familiar. For a fleeting moment, Thomas saw Eleanor in Lucas's smile, in the way his eyes lit up when he talked about something he loved. It was as if a part of her, which had been dormant in the boy all this time, had finally awakened. "Would you like to meet her?" Lucas asked suddenly, interrupting his father's thoughts. "Ruby? I mean, She's coming tomorrow. We can show you our Little Red Riding Hood play. Thomas hesitated for only a second before nodding. Yes, I would very much like to meet your friend Ruby. The smile Lucas gave in return was brighter than all the chandeliers in the Blackwood mansion combined. Thomas Blackwood cancelled 3 important meetings and postponed his flight to Singapore, an unprecedented move in his rigidly planned schedule. After the dinner the previous night, where Lucas had demonstrated his linguistic skills, Thomas needed to meet the girl who had brought about such a transformation in his son. "Martha, what time does the cleaner's daughter usually arrive?" he asked during breakfast, which he rarely took in the dining room. "Ruby arrives with her mother at 8, sir," Martha replied, pouring more coffee. "They've been with us for almost a year." "A year?" Thomas frowned, surprised he hadn't noticed before. "And how long has this girl been teaching my son?" "Since late last summer," Martha explained. "It started as casual meetings and then became more regular." She hesitated before adding, "It was one of my better decisions, if I may say so." Thomas watched the housekeeper with renewed interest. Martha, always so formal and reserved, rarely expressed personal opinions. "I would like to speak with the girl in my office this morning," he declared. "Alone?" Martha looked momentarily concerned. "Sir, she is only 6 years old. Perhaps it would be better if—" "It's not an interrogation, Martha." Thomas smiled faintly. "I just want to meet the person who achieved what doctors, therapists, and expensive tutors could not." Making my son smile again. At 9 o'clock, after Lucas had started his math lesson, Ruby entered Thomas's immense office. She wore a simple light blue dress and her blonde hair was in a messy braid she had likely done herself. She nervously clutched the strap of her small, worn backpack. To Thomas's surprise, the girl walked up to him with steady steps and extended her small hand. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood. I'm Ruby Bennett. It's a pleasure to meet you." Thomas accepted the handshake, impressed by the child's composure. "The pleasure is mine, Ruby." "Please, have a seat." She climbed into the chair that was too big for her, placing her backpack on her lap like a protective shield. Her blue eyes, however, met Thomas's without hesitation. "My son has told me some impressive things about you," Thomas began. "As he says you've taught him 7 different languages." "Actually, it was only 4 completely," Ruby corrected him seriously. "French, Spanish, Italian, and German. The other 3, Russian, Japanese, and Mandarin, he only knows some basic words and phrases." Thomas smiled, admiring the girl's honesty. "Still, it's remarkable. Where did a girl your age learn so many languages?" "From my grandpa," Ruby replied, her face lighting up. "He was a language professor. Before he got sick, he would teach me every day after school." "Your grandfather must be an extraordinary man." "He is," Ruby exclaimed with enthusiasm. "He lived in many different countries and speaks more than 10 languages. He used to say that each language is a different way of seeing the world." Thomas leaned forward, genuinely interested. "And how did you decide to teach what you knew to Lucas?" Ruby thought for a moment before answering. "He seemed so lonely and sad, like he was trapped not just in the chair but also inside himself." She hesitated, afraid she had said the wrong thing. "I'm sorry if that sounds rude." "No, please continue," Thomas encouraged, surprised by the child's sharp perception. "My grandpa always said that learning new things is like opening windows when you're in a dark room. Each thing you learn lets in a little more light." Ruby smiled. "So I thought Lucas needed more windows opened." The simple words hit Thomas with unexpected force. For years, since the accident, he had focused on providing his son with the best medical care, the best tutors, the best equipment, everything money could buy. But he had never thought about the light, about the human warmth that a simple friendship could bring. "Your grandfather seems to be very wise," he commented, hiding the emotion in his voice. "He is," Ruby exclaimed, opening her backpack. "Look, I brought a picture of him." She held out a photograph, worn at the edges. It showed an elderly man with grey hair and kind eyes, sitting in an armchair with little Ruby on his lap, both holding an open book. Is this Professor Bennett?" Thomas asked, taking the photo carefully. Ruby nodded. "This one is more recent." But I have another one that Mom says is from when he was young and taught at an important school. She rummaged in her backpack and pulled out another photograph, this one protected by a plastic sleeve. It was an old plain black and white photo showing a young man in a suit in front of a classroom full of boys. Thomas took the photo with hands that suddenly didn't feel so steady. This is his class from 1985, Ruby explained proudly. At the Brighton Academy for Boys, he kept this picture in his office before he moved to the nursing home. Thomas didn't reply. His eyes were fixed on the image, particularly on one of the boys in the front row, thin, with neatly combed dark hair and a serious expression, so different from the other smiling boys. "This is me," he said finally, pointing to the boy. His voice sounded strange, even to his own ears. Ruby's eyes widened. "You were my grandpa's student," Thomas nodded slowly, long-buried memories resurfacing like bubbles in deep water. "Professor Bennett, literature and foreign languages. I was 11 when this picture was taken." He stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to Ruby, struggling to maintain the composure he rarely lost. The memories came flooding back. The orphan boy who had won a scholarship to the prestigious Brighton Academy, treated with disdain by his wealthy classmates and many of the teachers, except for one. "Your grandfather was the only teacher who believed in me," he said finally, still looking out at the city below. "I was poor, with no family, no connections. The other teachers tolerated me because of my grades, but they made it clear I would never truly be part of that world." He turned, meeting Ruby's attentive eyes. Professor Bennett was different. He gave me extra books to read, stayed after class to discuss ideas with me, and encouraged me when I said I wanted to build something of my own. "That sounds like Grandpa," Ruby smiled. "He always says that everyone has something special inside them, they just need someone to see it." Thomas slowly returned to his chair, still holding the photograph. "Where is your grandfather now, Ruby?" "At Sunset Gardens nursing home," she replied, a shadow of sadness crossing her face. "He had a stroke 2 years ago and can't walk well anymore. He can't live alone now." "Does he still have visitors?" Ruby nodded. "Mom and I go every Sunday. I read to him and tell him about Lucas. That always makes him smile." Thomas made a sudden decision. "Ruby, do you think your grandfather would like a surprise visit today?" The girl's eyes widened with excitement. "You want to visit Grandpa? He would be so happy. He always asks about his old students, but not many go to see him." That afternoon, a luxury car pulled up in front of the modest Sunset Gardens nursing home. Thomas got out first, followed by a bouncing Ruby. There was something different about the billionaire. His usually rigid posture seemed more relaxed, and he was carrying a package wrapped in plain paper. "Room 205, Ruby informed him, guiding him through the nursing home's corridors with the familiarity of a frequent visitor. The room was small but cozy, with books stacked on every available surface. By the window, an elderly man in a wheelchair was watching the garden. "Grandpa!" Ruby called, running to hug him. "I brought a special visitor." Professor Bennett turned, his wrinkled face lighting up at the sight of his granddaughter. Then his eyes met Thomas's, and an expression of gradual recognition took over his features. "Young Blackwood?" he asked, in a voice that was weak but clear. "Thomas Blackwood. Is that really you?" Thomas stepped forward, extending a hand that the old professor shook with surprising firmness. "Yes, Professor Bennett. It's been a long time." "Almost 30 years, the old man smiled. "But I'd recognize those determined eyes anywhere. Sitting in the front row, always with your hand up to answer the hardest questions." Thomas sat in the chair beside him, while Ruby settled on the arm of her grandfather's armchair. "I see you've met my granddaughter," the professor commented. "Ruby told me about the boy she's teaching, a little boy in a wheelchair who learns languages with impressive speed. I never imagined it was your son. And I never imagined my son was being taught by the granddaughter of the man who most influenced my own education," Thomas replied. The conversation flowed easily, as if decades hadn't passed. Professor Bennett asked about Thomas's company, while Thomas took an interest in his former teacher's career after Brighton Academy. "I left formal teaching after 15 years, the professor explained. "I traveled the world, worked as a translator, gave private lessons. I never got rich, but I lived a full life. And you changed many lives in the process, Thomas added. He hesitated before continuing, his voice lower, including mine. If I've gotten this far, it's because one day you believed in me when everyone else doubted. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, Thomas Blackwood's eyes filled with unshed tears. You gave me something no other adult had given me before. Respect. You treated me like someone with potential, not a charity case. Professor Bennett smiled, his own eyes moist. I only saw what was there, Thomas. The determination, the intelligence, the will to prove your worth. All I did was give it space to flourish. Before they left, Thomas handed him the package he had brought. Professor Bennett opened it to reveal a rare edition of The Little Prince in French. Do you remember lending me your personal copy when I was learning French? Thomas asked. I never forgot the story of the lonely little prince on his planet. And it seems that now our lonely little princes have found each other, the old man replied, looking fondly at Ruby. On the way back, Thomas remained silent for a long time, thoughtful. Finally, he turned to Ruby in the back seat. Ruby, would you like to study at the same school as Lucas? The girl's eyes widened. But Lucas studies at home. Not for much longer, Thomas replied with determination. It's time for him to re-enter the world. And I think it would be easier with a friend by his side. That evening, Thomas had a long conversation with Sophia, Ruby's mother. The woman listened in disbelief as the billionaire explained his plans to enroll Ruby and Lucas at Westfield Academy, one of the best schools in the city. Mr. Blackwood, I can't accept, Sophia began. It's not charity, Sophia, Thomas interrupted. It's a debt I'm repaying to a teacher who once saw potential in a boy who had nothing. 3 weeks later, an elegant car pulled up in front of Westfield Academy. Sophia nervously adjusted Ruby's new uniform, while Thomas helped Lucas get situated in his wheelchair. What if the other kids don't like me? Lucas whispered to his father, an old fear resurfacing. Thomas knelt to be at his son's eye level. They will get to know the Lucas I know now, smart, interesting, and able to speak in 7 languages, and you won't be alone. Ruby came closer and held out her hand to Lucas. Ready, polyglot? Premier jour d'école. Lucas smiled, taking her hand. I'm ready. Insieme, siamo forti. Together, we are strong, in Italian. Thomas and Sophia stood side by side, watching their children enter the school gates hand in hand. The boy who once lived isolated in his luxurious mansion, and the girl whom everyone used to ignore. As the morning sun bathed the schoolyard, Thomas felt something long absent in his chest, hope. The circle that began decades ago, when a teacher believed in an orphan boy, was now complete through 2 children united by the most unlikely of friendships. And in that moment, Professor Bennett's words echoed in his mind like a promise. Our lonely little princes have found each other. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.